So I'm very self-centered. As I was taking notes about Jim's presentation, how many of you have adult children that you hope someday find their way back to the church? Yeah, I'm taking notes like, man, my son is 32 and he's about to get married, and I'm thinking this is in his near future. I hope there's a neighborhood church like Jim's within the neighborhood. He could meet a Jim at a bar and find a faith community. That is
where does he live?
Hope. He lives in Madison, Wisconsin.
All right, I'll look it up. I'll see if I can find something.
Well, thank you.
There are a lot of bars.
There are a lot of bars.
Of course there are.
Right. He, of course, I love my son. I knew he was growing up when he took a job in Madison. At the time, he was living in Portland. And he said, Dad, I've decided to expand my job search outside of states where marijuana is legal. The sign of maturity. Okay. All right, so here's a quiz for you. What are Jim's 3 methods to build the dynamic, young, growing church? Number 1 is
Listening.
Yeah. Number 2 is
Connecting.
and then number 3 is
Facilitate.
facilitate, right? And that's my job. I feel like I'm a facilitator. And the way I think of my work, a lot of people think stewardship is fundraising. They're almost synonymous. Having done it, I prefer to not think it's fundraising. I prefer to think of it as facilitating God's will. Being a servant to God and helping other people discover how God can work through them. That's how I look at my life. And it has resulted in a pretty joyful 30 years. And the coolest part of my life is to observe the hand of God alive and at work. And I'm going to ask Gene to talk for a minute, and I'm going to ask Bishop to talk for a minute. What is it like to facilitate the movement of the hand of God through something that you did as a facilitator? So before I ask them to talk, I'll tell you about 3 miracles, 3 hand of God experiences I have observed personally, and I have seen facilitators at work. The first was in July of 1979. I had taken a 5-day float trip down the Congo River. And I did that because I grew up with a mother who thought that was normal things. Her first job out of college was working in the American Embassy in Iceland. So I grew up hearing about those wild adventures, and I thought that was normal. So my first job out of college was the American Embassy in Kinshasa, Zaire. And of course, you got to take a float trip down the Congo River. I read The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I wanted to get some of that for myself. Well, I ended up in a war zone with a gun to my head. I had on green pants. And you need to suspend your imagination for a moment, but imagine me with brown curly hair. Now, I know that is a stretch. And I had a brown beard, and I was very tan, and I had on green pants. In a war zone, in an Angolan war zone, I looked like a Cuban mercenary. And these 2 Zaire military police came down the cliff, across the beach, guns pointed at me, speaking their language, which I could not understand. But I can speak a little bit of French, which is Belgian French, which is the language of Zaire. And I could finally discover that they thought I was a Cuban mercenary who was part of the war. And they were going to kill me. And it was quite an argument. And I grew up Catholic, and I went to a Baptist college. But this moment really seemed to be the first moment when I should probably pray and mean it. So I did. I prayed. It's kind of funny because I was such a reprobate at the time. You'd think the prayer that would come out would be, Dear God, if you get me out of this, I swear I'll be good. But what came out of me with a gun pointed at me was, Dear God, into your hands I commend my soul. Because I was ready. I thought, well, didn't thought it would happen this way, but take me. And I lower my head, prepared to have my brain splattered across the beach, and then my body would fall in the ocean. I'd be eaten by the fish, never heard from again. I was ready for that, but I literally turned my hands upward, giving it up to God. And as I did that, the older one, who only had one eye, lowered the weapon of the younger guy, who was just so angry. He was ready to kill me in a moment. And so that's miracle number 1. How did God work And why was my life? I don't know. The only word I've got for that is mystical. Okay? Second miracle was I met my wife. I bought a T-shirt from her at a charity event. Then that was on a Monday. It was a golf thing. I'm no good at golf. I go and I'm embarrassed myself, but I supported financially. Okay? That was on Monday. On a Tuesday, I happened to be in her boss's office, and she comes by, and we get introduced. Then I bumped into her once a week, and it was that just never happens to me. Still, it takes me 9 months to ask her out. A little slow on the uptake. We're dating for 3 months, and she has a party, and her brother comes to the party. She introduces me to her brother, who's a surly electrician. And he said, well, Dennis, I think I remember you. I think I remember you from childhood. Did you go swimming at Ward Parkway Pool? I said, yeah, I did. He said, well, I remember when Jenny was 6 and you were a teenager. She was on the high dive, and I was yelling at her, get down off the high dive, you're too little. So as she turned to come down off this 10-foot high dive, she slipped and fell face first towards the concrete. And then he says, as you put your hands on the ladder to go up the high dive, you caught her. And my wife literally steps away and says, that was you? And I stepped away and I said, that was you? Now, he is a surly individual, sweaty, mean, tough as nails. He would not have said anything nice optionally. Okay? He would not have chosen. I remembered it clearly. She remembered it clearly. I remember talking to my mom about that. I said, it's so weird to bump into her all the time. And then this thing 22 years ago, I caught her off the high dive. Do you think it's the hand of God? She said, well, it's either that or she's a stalker. Have you thought of it? No, Mom, I don't think so. And then the third one, let's see, the accidental hand of God. That was about 10 years ago. My daughter, I was doing a cartwheel in the dining room. I'm walking in from the living room. She kicks me in the gut, 120 miles an hour. It hurts so bad, I think I've got a broken internal organ. So I go to the doctor, get a scan. The doctor says, well, she didn't break anything, but you have a tumor. You have cancer. So we have to do a full scan and surgery, and you're going to need the whole enchilada. I can tell you right now, it doesn't look good. And I go home, and I, of course, tell my family. It's a year later. And, of course, our conclusion is this is an accidental miracle, right? And this little girl has saved my life. A year later, we're out in the backyard, and we're fixing the swing set. And I make the mistake of drilling overhead in a wood beam with no goggles on. I get a splinter in my eye, right where the pink part meets your eye. And she's with me. And I say, honey, I drop the drill. I say, honey, you're going to have to get this out. Run like the wind. My bathroom, second drawer, get 2 Q-tips. You're going to have to do this. She runs up, she runs back. By then I'm laying on the ground, holding my, because every time I blink, it would just jab my eye. Right? So I'm laying. One knee, she goes down on one knee, she looks at me and gives me the instructions. She says, time to man up. Who is this little John Wayne I have as a daughter? So she takes a deep breath, goes in, pinches the thing, and pulls it out. And I blink and I say, well, yeah, I think you got it. So we go in, we're sitting at the kitchen table. My wife comes down, we tell her the whole story. She passed my daughter on the hand and says, that's really something. How do you feel about that? Little John Wayne says, well, that's twice now I've saved his life. So she doesn't know how awesome she is. Well, the other day, she's gonna summer camp. Anybody know Lake Okoboji?
Yeah.
She goes there every summer for the YMCA summer camp. She's gonna learn windsurfing this summer. She comes home at the end of last year. She knows what she wants to do the next year, which is not coming up in a couple weeks. She said, Dad, camp next year, I'm gonna learn how to windsurf. I said, well, that's pretty cool. She says, because I want to go, you and me, I want to go windsurfing on the Sea of Galilee. I said, like, you are better than John Wayne. Wow. Epic little girl who's now 5'10". She's not a little girl anymore. But it's really kind of cool from my little tiny life to see 3 miracles, 3 facilitators of God's will. Maybe unknowing, unwitting, not deliberate, certainly, but that's the coolest thing in the world. And you know what? in my job as a facilitator of stewardship, I get to see it every day. Every day I see somebody making a decision to be a facilitator of God's will. Just a minute ago, this lady right here, what's your name?
Jolene.
Jolene says, this epic, awesome presentation. Let me tell you what we're doing at our church. We're going to have a youth choir. There are 3 schools within walking distance. We're
But
within
in our area.
in your area. And this is going to be our way to engage and serve and connect. I said, that's fantastic. People will give to that because people have this desire to serve God and be a conduit for God's blessing. And that I already know you're going to, I'll donate to that. Okay? Send me a letter.
I'll get you.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask the bishop and Jean to each talk for 30 seconds. What is it like when you invite somebody to become engaged in the vision of your institution? Jean's a retired college president, and they respond with a gift more than $100,000, and they're happy about it. Okay? Now, Bishop, this happened to Bishop fairly recently. Do you mind telling them 30 seconds about your experience? What's it like to observe a person seeking to facilitate God's will generously, happily?
There's a benefactor who's, well, it's not going to be 30 seconds, okay?
Okay.
There's a benefactor who had given an undesignated gift of $20,000. And we didn't really know what to do with it. We left it there on the books for a while. And he insisted that he wanted to give more. And he was going to make a substantial gift. He'd sort of, we talked about it, he said it'd be about $500,000. Well, about a year went by, and we still got the 20,000. When revival came along, we said, well, it's undesignated, we'll use that for the revival. So when we came around to more talks with this particular potential donor, I said, this is what we did with your 20,000, and here's all the results. And I talked about the revival, which he knew about. Well, because of that, he gave us 100,000 for 2018. And I said, we can use that for growing Iowa leaders, and this is what we're funded and what we're doing now. Well, the other day he said, I'm ready to finish off the gift, and went for lunch, and over lunch I said, so how do we do this? He said, how are we going to do this? He said, well, you're direct. I said, I thought I was saying, get your checkbook out. Well, he got his checkbook out, wrote a check, gave it to me, $500,000. The usual person that I am, I said, I thought, shouldn't this be 400,000? I said, you already gave 100. He gave me a look that said, be quiet. Accept what you've got and move on. And so I did. And he did give me the grace to sort of pay for the check that day over lunch. But it's a remarkable thing to receive such a remarkable gift. We had thought that if we were going to be raising money to do what we're doing now, that was going to be the core of our fundraising for the future, to be able to do what we're doing now into the future. What this donor has done is given us the ability to not only show you how formation can happen when it's done from grassroots, doing exactly what Jim is saying, listening, and then connecting with what we're listening, and then facilitating. Absolutely, those are the 3 things that this process is doing. And it is a miracle. I mean, you just recognize, and it's a wonderful way to put it, Dennis, you recognize that this is facilitating God's work. Because you feel it in the joy, and the person that gave the gift said how much they felt the pride of their own family as they gave the gift. And that was the grace.
So, was it resentful or was it joyful?
Joyful.
Boy, it was so joyful. Okay, come on up here, Gene. Okay, so Gene has been a college president of a couple different colleges, and now we are co-workers for church development. And we're working together on the Gilead fundraising effort. And he has asked many people for enormous amounts of money. And what's it like to be the recipient? Could you give the same reflections, kind of similar to what Bishop said?
Well,
something like that, but not as eloquent as the bishop, you know. We have greater expectations for our bishop, and he fulfills them. In terms of, I guess we moved here 22 years ago. I'd been president of Southeastern Community College in Burlington for 11 years, and member of Patrick Generou's Christ Church, which was real close to where we lived, and Patrick was very good, and the person he followed was also great. He was on my staff part-time very nicely. Some of you might remember him, or maybe not. But nonetheless, so we hooked up with St. Timothy's, and I came here, I was 22 years ago as executive director of the Community College Trustees. I did that for 11 years. When I turned 70, then I retired from that, and that was 11 years ago actually, and I've done a couple of interims over in Illinois since then. But I've been pretty active at St. Timothy's recently. Well, for the past maybe 10 years or something, I've been coordinator of spatial gifts, and they'd never really had anybody designated as that before, and it has been a joy to fulfill that mission, and it's been very helpful to St. Timothy's and to our mission, because after a while, people think about some spatial gifts. I'll give you an example. One day I got a call on a Sunday from a parishioner. He said, I'd like to meet my wife, and I'd like to meet you and Mary Ann down church this afternoon about 5 o'clock. I said, great. So I walked into the sanctuary, and he said, I've got an idea. In our sanctuary, we had a wooden oak door on each side, and the sanctuary is mostly glass, and it really didn't fit. And of course, the sun hit on the south side of the wood, and it looks bad. It got bad right away. In fact, we replaced it a couple times. Well, this person said to me, I want to replace those wooden doors with plate glass doors. He said, will you get the bids? I said, yes, I'll get a couple, 3 bids. And I worked with the junior warden who was in charge of facilities at our church anyhow, and the lowest and best bid was about $5,000. This individual, I told him and called him, and he said, go ahead, get the work done, and we'll be sending a check or bringing a check Sunday. And that's one of the things that have happened. We've had some that have been smaller, but that's worked out very well. We've also done recently remodeling of the fellowship hall and the kitchen. Our kitchen was about as big as, well, I can't tell you, maybe 8 by 10 or something, since 1965. We have a beautiful kitchen and fellowship hall now, and it's a $535,000 project. We hope to pick up another $100,000 within the next month or two. We have $435,000 in the bank. We had some pace setters, but one thing that's been very helpful in this whole process, as we got moving along, we intentionally had some matching gifts. The first one was $5,000, I think. And so I sent out a little release, and Mary Coldeval, our priest, put it in the Sunday service bulletin and so forth. And the first thing you know, people started that match gift. One of the things we found out about a match gift, and I don't know where I came up with the idea, but I think I pulled it out of thin air or something. But the fact is, people can contribute to a match gift. They can contribute $100, they can contribute $1,000, and the notion always is that it's released as match comes in. So I think about a person who stopped me a year ago this summer in the hall. Well, it wasn't quite summer yet, we were still in choir, so I took my choir robe off, put it in the choir room, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder. This individual said to me, Gene, I want to make a match gift. I don't have very much money. I live on Social Security, and I have a small CD at the bank. I said, well, they're absolutely almost worth nothing. Not quite, but she said I could do $100. She had tears in her eyes. And match gifts, we found, are a way for people who contributed significant or not so much to feel a part of the program. We've had, I think, Dennis, we've had a $1,000 match gift, which we just completed. We've had a 2, we've had 3 5s, we've had an 8 and a 10. I think that should total up to about $36,000 in the past 18, 20 months or some such. After we got some of the big pace setters and the early movement out of the way, and I told Dennis, I think at lunch Wednesday, I don't believe I don't believe we would have had that $72,000 without those match gifts. We might have had part of it, I wouldn't say that, but it's been a very, it's been a wonderful idea, and it does give you a great deal of joy because you see what's happening, and you look at our fellowship hall and you see all the activities now. You see junior high kids are there once a week during the school year with some special mentoring and tutoring, and it goes on and on and on. We were not doing a lot of these before in the old fellowship hall. It just didn't happen. You say, well, it should have. I agree, but it didn't.
Thank you, Gene. So from these two, you have a little glimpse of what it's like to facilitate that awesomeness. Now, we in the church, we have this weird phenomenon. The average Episcopalian gives 2.2% of their income to the church. And moving them off that 2.2% to give 2.3% takes, some seismic explosion, unless you do something different. But more of the same results in more of the same. You do something interesting like a challenge grant, you do something interesting like the Gilead, you do something really interesting like listen. That boggles people's minds. That's never happened. Nobody in the church asked my opinion before. Or to connect. Nobody ever bothered before. So we've got to do something a little different. So our value proposition here is how to increase generosity without fundraising. So the things I'm going to tell you, man, they don't look like fundraising at all. They look nothing like prayer. Prayer should really be the centerpiece. And it's a particular kind of prayer. Discernment. Dear God, what would you do through me? That's the best prayer. That is our secret weapon. What's your thought about the vision? What's your idea for a new project? How should we approach this? Those are the things that break open the dams of generosity. Now, so my experience, here, let me use this. So I've been doing this since 82. So I know right away you're thinking, oh, he started when he was born. You're right, okay? So I have a lot of experience doing this, and I've raised a couple $100 million. And the weird thing is, I will help a church raise $1 million or $2 or $10 million, and then we're still friends, which is remarkable. And they invite me back, and they invite my family, and it's a love fest. How weird is that? Okay, it's really pleasant. I feel like I have the most wonderful job in the world because I feel like I'm a facilitator. I get to see the hand of God work through each of us. Now, I am married. I'm married to a wonderful woman. She reminds me almost on a daily basis, Dennis, you can go 0 to boring in 2.7 seconds. Get ready, okay? Here comes boredom. Now, you have everything I'm going to say in your handout. And I will confess to you right now, it's a little bit boring, okay? But I want to equip you with some numbers so that you become a ninja, okay? A ninja in the world of stewardship. This is a picture of cows, and a couple of them on the left are sitting down. We're driving across Kansas one time, and my oldest daughter says, oh, look, Dad, some cows are sitting down. And she had just read the Laura Ingalls Wilder book, okay? Oh. I said, well, yeah, they're indeed sitting down. This is not the actual photo, okay?
Sitting down?
Sitting down. Cows are sitting down. Or laying down.
Laying down. I've never seen a cow sit.
They're in repose.
They're not standing.
Yeah, they weren't doing a yoga posture. So she said, you know what that means? I said, well, they're tired. I don't know what. She said, imminent precipitation. And I think, what are they teaching her at school? Or was she switched at birth? Imminent precipitation, what is that? She said, it's about to rain. That's what it means. She said, I said, that's pretty interesting. She said, well, Dad, you got to look at the big picture. You got to look at the pattern. I said, well, okay, my little 3rd grade daughter. Thank you for giving me that. This is one of those weird statistics. You know what percent of the people actually give 10%? Only 5%. 1 out of 20 people are generous as we have been invited in Scripture. It's kind of weird since I've done so many campaigns. Those people tend to self-identify to me. And years ago when I was just starting in this business, my immediate response is, well, don't worry about it. This doesn't apply to you. You're already so generous. And they would say, well, whoa. We look for stuff to invest in. Because I've got this relationship with God. I look for ways to be a conduit for God's blessing. They would say that in their own ways. And I'm like, man, I want to be like that. I want to be that kind of person that has that kind of relationship with God. And that has kind of lifted me up and inspired me. Now, of those who do give generously, this statistic is from a book titled Give to Live by Gregory Lawson. He has studied objectively and subjectively generous people. Of those, 95 say, I have a better relationship with God. I'm closer to God since I decided to be generous. Objectively, he took blood samples and found generous people have an increased level of T cell production in their immune system. Go figure that. Isn't that interesting? Now, we in the fundraising world, we have this kind of hilarious statistic that is proof of this. If you remember the church in your estate plan, you live 7 years longer than average. And is it because, is that so the church will never get their money? I don't know. But we're healthier, okay? It produces endorphins like chocolate and like running. Eastern European researcher Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, he followed Maslow in the research of high functioning humans, and he coined the term flow. So these Olympic athletes would say, what I'm doing just feels like a miracle. I don't know how I jump 8 feet high. I just do it, and it's so natural. It just flows. They use the same kind of language as generous donors. I feel like I'm participating with God. Now, I like this. I love this quote. Joy is the infallible sign of the presence of God. Okay, it is so weird to be in Bishop's luncheon booth and receive a $500,000 check, and the donor's given more than they said they were going to give, and they're happy that that happened. This happens to me on a regular basis. The joyful part, it's awesome. So how do we unleash that? We use Jim's word, facilitate. Okay, guess what it's not? It's not give or go to hell. Yeah, that doesn't I remember when I moved to a new city, I was long ago, early 80s. I was church shopping. I just walked to the churches I could walk to, and one time I ended up in a Southern Baptist church, and I sat in the back on the left on the aisle, and there was a moment in the service where everyone turned around and looked at me. And when I say looked at me, they're just like this. What? What did I do? And I turned to the person and I said, why is everybody looking at me? And she said, well, you're sitting in the seat where we begin giving our gifts back to God. So you have to stand up and you got to walk down to the front and take out your wallet, take out your money and put it in the basket that the preacher is holding, and then walk back around. Okay, I am trembling. I am sweating. And at that moment I'm praying, dear Lord, please let there be some money in my wallet. Okay, please, at least $1. And thank goodness. So this facilitation process is an invitational one. It is not high pressure. It is not give or go to hell. It's not let everybody see how much you give. Rather, it is based in prayer. I really love the Sea of Galilee. I'm going to go there someday. Anybody been there? Do people really windsurf on the Sea of Galilee?
Well, they couldn't have the day I was there, but you know.
Sailing? Anybody seen sailing? Do they sail? Well, if they can sail, they can windsurf.
I think Jesus
Proof's in the pudding. So one day when my son, my youngest son, John, I have 2 boys and 2 girls. John asked me, he's about 3 years old. Anybody notice that when you're tucking a 3-year-old into bed, they become the most gifted, lively conversationalists? Because I'm tucking them in, we say our prayer, we say good night. Well, wait. Yes, I'm thinking glass of water, a cookie, and I'm like, yes, John. He says, tell me about yourself. What do you do for a living? Okay, so I go back, I sit down. I say, all right, John, now you know your illustrated Bible. You know that part where Jesus was baptized? Do you know what the name of that one was? Anybody here know what that was? Where he was baptized? Jordan River, right? And then do you know where he walked on the water, right? The Sea of Galilee. And so John, like, oh yeah, I know that. I said, well, now do you know that the water flows back out of there and it goes down and goes to another body of water? Anybody know what that one is?
The Dead Sea.
Dead Sea. And so I asked John the trick question. I said, guess what lives in the Dead Sea? And he was stumped finally, right? Finally slowed him down. I have no idea, Dad. I said, well, nothing. Okay, it's the Dead Sea. Now guess what the difference is between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea?
Outros.
I have no idea, Dad. I said, well, water flows through the Sea of Galilee. But when it gets to the Dead Sea, it just goes in and stops. So what does stagnant water become? Brackish and lifeless and kind of gross. So the work I do facilitates the flow of God's blessings through people's life. Kind of like the river through the Sea of Galilee. Well, he could get that I get that, because he'd been fishing already at the age of 3. He'd been with me fishing and swimming and tromping through. So that is the natural state of human beings, to be like that Sea of Galilee. So guess what is it the biggest thing in the way? It's our ego, and it is fear and a sense of disconnectedness. I got a great quote from Mother Teresa. In her book, she talks about her relationship with God, and she had this experience of God speaking to her one day, and God said to her, if you concern yourself with my affairs, I will concern myself with your affairs. And I have found that to be entirely true. The moment we try to have a youth choir, or to outreach, or serve the homeless, or the young people whose friend was in such a distress, the moment we attempt to help, God conspires to help us. So, how do we do that? How do we let God's blessings flow through us? Well, first, I want to kind of take the negative view, and this is bad news. Only, the average person gives 1% to 2% of their money, usually 30% pledge, 30% volunteer. This is miserable. This is absolutely horrible. Of all the churches, so this is 100 churches up here, only half have an annual campaign or a volunteer fair. Only 20% have a stewardship committee. Only 1% teach stewardship. Less than 1% spend any money on it. So this right away tells you what you got to do. So to have a culture of stewardship, and I'm going to talk for one more minute, then we're going to break, okay? You got to have these things. You got to have somebody, at least one person, who's your committee, who is in charge of it. And if you have that, then Gene and I can do a whole heck of a lot of the work. We'll be with you for the next 3 years holding your hand. If you've got a committee, man, we've got about 100 case stories and techniques and tools. We got a thick manual with all kinds of stuff. We will just give you to make stewardship happen in your church. You got to communicate about it. We'll give you something to put in your Sunday bulletin every Sunday that doesn't ask for money, that rather communicates what's this business of God working through me. Scripture and stories, kind of like the Sea of Galilee. That's the best story, I think. And it doesn't ask for money. It's just about discerning God's will in my life. You need to do a campaign. Every year you got to do a campaign. Every once in a while you got to do a capital campaign to blast us off that average gift of 2%. So my historical average, having done more than 200 church capital campaigns, we get people to increase their giving by 50% per year for 3 years. That's a norm. That's typical. Sometimes they double their giving for 3 years. This is how I make my living. I did not rent these clothes. I own these clothes. I have made enough of an income to support myself and my family doing this. It works. Okay, this is not a surprise, new and different, weird thing. Churches have capital campaigns all the time. So these are the results I have seen. So I know what is possible. Okay? Have a campaign every year, an annual campaign. You don't have to exert pressure. You just ask them to pray their way through it. State an intention, what you're considering to give to the church for the year ahead. Make it a deliberate decision. You got to have a culture, which means you use the words of stewardship and cost. You got to spend a little bit of money. So here, I'll talk more this afternoon about what's a committee look like, what does communication look like, what's a campaign look like, what does a culture of stewardship, and what does a cost look like. There are some patterns that have emerged. The 80-20 rule for donors, 80% of the money comes from 20% of the people. That is the economic stratification of our country. The only difference is some people have more money. We all tend to give around 2%, whether you make $1 million a year or $10,000 a year. We all tend to bubble right around 80-20% for volunteer. Now this CAVE group is very interesting. I don't want you to be discouraged. This term comes from Gallup polling and their analysis of churches. CAVE, you have these people in your church. It stands for consistently against virtually everything. This is not you. This is a common phenomenon. So people will complain, no matter. So get ready. They will complain to you. Now, the last thing I want to share before we break is there is a spirituality of fundraising, and you can choose to be a servant of God as you go forward and to invite people into doing God's will. And there is no pressure in that. It is an invitation. And if people are not called to participate in this vision that you are serving, that's fine. They can do something else. But it is incumbent upon us to plant the seed and pour a little water on it. And if it lands in rocky ground, it ain't gonna grow. But if it's the right fertile ground, it will. So this afternoon, we're gonna spend time walking through the details of what that's gonna look like. Okay, the things you can do to plant and water. Now, if you have a choice between coming to my workshop or Jim's, go to Jim's, okay?
You gotta learn something there, because you gotta learn how to fund it.
Right, you do have to learn how to fund it. Okay, but I'll be with you for 3 years. So if you're dying to find out what I got, man, I have. Matter of fact, when do we have to be at? We have to be there by 8 tonight? Is that what I've?
Well, you don't know is I'm going to your breakout.
So we'll move quick. We'll cover a lot of stuff. But if you have a calling, pray about it. If you got a calling to go to Jim's, go to Jim's. But I'm available too. Okay, so we're going to break now for lunch.
Wait a minute,
Bishop?
one question.
Yes.
How are you available? If you're around for 3 years, how are you available?
I work through the bishop's office and the stewardship commission as well.
Okay.
And so there'll be regular offerings through the stewardship commission, both events like this of training plus online resources. Okay?
Gene, aren't you available?
Yes?
Yes.
I am.
Gene lives right down.
Okay.
Yeah, Gene lives 20 minutes away. I live in Kansas City, but
Oh,
I'm up here every
okay,
Wednesday,
okay.
and sometimes Thursday, and sometimes Saturday, sometimes Sunday. I just hop, skip, and yes.
What was the rest of the acronym for CAVE?
Oh,
Consistently against virtually everything.